Welcome into the RotoWire March Madness West Region Preview. Florida leads the way. St. John's are the big teams to talk about. We're going to get to some sleeper teams, some of our favorites, and then get into who we think is going to get to the Final Four. But first up, Ryan, 4-seed Maryland, an intriguing team. Derek Queen getting a lot of buzz. Julian Reese playing next to him at the 4 and 5. Is this team deep enough, though, is the question. They run almost 5 guys, and depth might be a concern in March Madness. Well, how do you think of their prospects going forward?
Yeah, I think you could make a case that they have one of the best starting fives in the country. That 4-5 duo, Derek Queen, Julian Reese. I mean, those guys are just a load for anybody to come and match up with, especially this time of year. The backcourt, you look at those guys, all of those guys can, hit the three at a high clip. They just have a lot of pieces, honestly. Then they're an extremely complete team. The problem is that you mentioned the depth factor. So if they're just able to stay out of foul trouble, I think, the setup here, when you look at a Memphis team that, could potentially be down Tyrese Hunter, one of their best players, they got certainly a path to get here. I think there's a lot of good teams that we'll touch on sort of in this top half of the bracket, but Maryland for sure has been hitting their stride over the last, month and a half.
Yeah, let's actually stay with the top half of the bracket. Speaking of the other 5-12 matchup there, Maryland against Grand Canyon. A big thing here is I guess, in the West region in general is going to be injury issues for these teams. Tyrese Hunter, point guard, former Texas guy, former Iowa State guy. He really, going back a few years there, he really showed up in Maui. They beat Michigan State. They beat UConn. He was hitting all kinds of shots. He's also a defensive leader. And Dane Danger and PJ Haggerty are good players. But I think if Tyrese Hunter isn't healthy, if he isn't playing in this first game, I think it's a spot for Colorado State. One of my could be sleeper teams here. They've been on, I hate kind of picking MWC teams because they're terrible in the tournament. Outside of that one run by San Diego State a couple years ago, they just lose a lot. Last season it continued. So there is some Tennessee, a little bit of don't really want to do it kind of a thing with Colorado State, but they are playing. They have been the best MWC team to close the season. Nick Clifford has been awesome as their top player. And without Hunter, as long as Colorado State, a pretty good defensive rebounding team, they limit the second chance opportunities for Danger. If they can limit him, if Hunter isn't there to help Haggerty, I think it's a good spot for an upset. And then at that point, if it's Maryland or Grand Canyon, I almost think anything can happen with Clifford against that team. But again, does Colorado State have the bigs to deal with Dane Danger and then to possibly deal with Queen and Reese? I guess that might be the big question for them.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this time of year, everybody starts hyping up all the Mountain West teams, and you're right. They come in, whether it's 4 or 5, however many teams they get in, everybody starts hyping them up, and boom, they just lay an egg this time of year. So, yeah, I mean, Colorado State, man, they just absolutely steamrolled through the Mountain West tournament. I mean, a lot of those games were just no contest. So definitely coming in with big time momentum, but there's always just a little bit of pause whenever you come across some of those teams.
Yeah, one of the worries is Ethan Morton sometimes playing at the 4, a former Purdue guy who is never really when Purdue made the run last season, he didn't really have a role with them. Now he's on this Colorado State team getting legit minutes here. So I do like this team. Maybe pull off an upset against Memphis, but if it is Maryland, I'm just really not sure they have the size to deal with Queen and Reese down low. It's just gonna be maybe a little too much for them to handle. So I guess now that I'm thinking about it more, maybe I do like Maryland to get to the Sweet 16. Getting to the bottom a little bit here. Texas Tech, speaking of injuries, rotowire.com/cbasketball. We update injuries around the clock. And latest news on these Texas Tech guys, we're speaking Monday here. Darian Williams, Chance McMillian, both those guys are going to be playing in this first round game. They're going to be ready for the tournament. They both missed the last game of the Big 12 tournament for Texas Tech. I think with those guys healthy, I think that just gives them the little boost that they need to possibly, make a little run here. At times I've liked Texas Tech, but these injuries have kind of hurt them a little bit. They kind of disappointed in the tournament, just their defense wasn't there. But I think if you put all these pieces together, McMillian's their best 3-point shooter, 43% guy from beyond the arc, and Darian Williams kind of does a little bit of everything. And of course, JT Toppin has had some monster games this season. So I think if these guys are healthy, I think this is kind of maybe because St. John's is getting a little more buzz, that Texas Tech is kind of maybe under the radar, you could say. What are your thoughts in terms of that situation?
Yeah, I've been high on Texas Tech all year. I just really like the makeup of their team. JT Toppin, Big 12 Player of the Year, has just been unbelievable. You mentioned it, the 2 injuries they've had with Williams, McMillan. Both those guys are huge. McMillan is just a shot maker, great shooter. Williams can kind of do it all really at that, kind of that stretch 4 position. He's a tough matchup for a lot of guys. And, then Elijah Hawkins, coming over this year, has been one of the top assist man in the Big 12. Seems to just get everybody in the right spot. So they gotta just, there's a lot of good pieces together here for this team. I mean, you just hope everything's sort of together. We saw the first foray into the Grant McCaslin era last year in the tournament. Didn't really go that great against the extremely hot team in NC State, but still got to watch for that because tournament's a different beast, man, and we'll see how the Red Raiders do it this year.
And they were one of my teams last season. Because that bottom of that bracket, I had the Red Raiders going a little bit, and of course DJ Burns is like, no, I'm here. It's not gonna happen. Instead, they made the run that I thought Texas Tech was gonna run, unfortunately. But if Texas Tech doesn't make a run this year, their possible second round opponent here, Missouri Drake, an interesting matchup. Missouri, just one of these SEC teams that doesn't really play defense. They like to run, chuck the ball up. Those teams tend to not do well in tournaments like this. Is Drake a team that could take them?
Yeah, I like Drake a lot. Bennett Sturtz, his year has been incredible, man. I mean, coming over from D2 school, him and his coach, both coming over from the D2 level. Pretty incredible what they've put together this year, especially losing both DeVries after the run that Drake had made the last couple years. So yeah, I think this team, they just have the makeup to frustrate a lot of these sort of, high major teams with how slow they play. They rebound the ball at a pretty good clip. I think they got a lot of really smart players on that team. And I think Missouri they've looked really, really good at times. They've looked really, really bad at times, and they're not coming in the best of form either. They've lost 4 of their last 5 games. And I think Drake has, enough to be able to frustrate that team. And, who knows if Texas Tech is still, if those guys that come back from injury aren't, 100%, you never know. This team could get to the Sweet 16 as well.
Yeah, I think that they can get these games to go the way they play. They're just going to try and punch them in the mouth, just make this ugly as ugly as possible. Missouri likes playing high scoring games, but if Drake can just get this into a game that's, within a few points either way in the final 4 minutes, where it's, 60-60 or something like that. Maybe they want lower scoring. I don't know if Missouri can get that low scoring, but I think even if they win that game in Texas Tech, it's just going to be low scoring duels that I think that would be interesting battles, just the way that Drake has played this season. And we have to get to St. John's here. St. John's is a pretty buzzy team with Rick Pitino as the 2 seed. And a possible matchup with your KU team here. You see in the background, we got a little bit of the fog there. We got a little RCJH going over there.
Oh, yeah.
St. John's here. What do you think about their run as a 2 seed? What do you think about how the bracket opens up for them outside of, the Texas Techs and the Drakes we just mentioned?
Yeah, I feel like when the season started, a lot of people really didn't buy them at all, and they just kept winning and winning and winning and winning. And now you look at them and they just pretty much powered through everybody that they faced in the Big East tournament. So, yeah, Rick Pitino, what's he going to do in the tournament again? This team, they're one of the best, if not the best defensive teams in the country. And they're just fine playing 55-50 type of game if they need to. And honestly, I look at this sort of region of the bracket here, and Kansas has kind of been the same way this year. A lot of the times, they've really struggled offensively, but they've been pretty good on the defensive end of the ball. And Arkansas too. Ever since they lost Boogie Flant, who might potentially come back for this game, they've sort of been sort of the same thing. It's not your typical John Calipari team. It's a team that's really sort of grinding more games out. And I feel like the committee just couldn't help themselves. It seems like putting all these legendary coaches together. So that's a different topic for another day. But
right,
yeah.
Kind of crazy who Pitino is gonna get in the second round. It's gonna be either one of these legends. But I was kind of doubting St. John's a little bit, but then they just ran through the Big East tournament. I don't know, maybe that has to do with MSG a little bit. Maybe about the home crowd, kind of home cooking a little bit. But man, they ran through that tournament, and the Big East is kind of ho hum whatever this season. So yeah, it's like, okay, 18-2 record in the Big East. It's fine, but they didn't really dominate to an extent, but they dominated every game in the Big East, at least in the second half of those games. So maybe they're just riding that. I still have some doubts. Everyone's gonna have doubts about their shooting, about their offense is pretty inconsistent, but with that defense with Pitino, a definite edge here. So are we thinking St. John's Elite Eight matchup? This is the West region. We barely talked about Florida. I've been on Florida for a few weeks now, pretty much since they got Hanglotten back there, a 7-1 guy, former center who's getting 10-15 minutes a game, just like their 8th guy coming off the bench. Just a really deep team. Do we think it's Florida St. John's? Is that the kind of matchup we're looking at, or is someone else stand out? It feels like this region doesn't really have as exciting teams to take down Florida and St. John's, maybe outside of Texas Tech. But what's the outlook here for the Elite Eight and beyond?
Yeah, I think other than potentially even UConn team, you never count out the best effing coach in the country, as they say. So
as they say, as to be said.
That's he says. No, but Florida, look, they are, I think a lot of people have hopped on board, and it seems like a lot of people think they might now be the favorite, after we've been singing the praises of Auburn and Duke all season long. They've each got their own sort of things they're dealing with. So, Florida, how do they respond to that pressure now that, everybody's sort of focusing on them now, it seems like? I do think, that matchup with Maryland potentially in the Sweet 16 would be extremely interesting. I do think, it's a good matchup for Florida, just considering, all the size they have on the inside. But I think it's going to be hard for any of these teams to really beat Florida because they just do everything so well.
I think just the matchups there, like I think Florida could just smoke Maryland in that spot. Derek Queen, when the pressure comes, we've seen it a few times this season where he's taken 3-pointers randomly and he does a little everything by himself. Julian Reese kind of gets in his head a lot as well. And then you have all of these bigs that Florida has just to throw at them. And then I think you have probably a better set of guards as well, and Clayton, Martin, and Richard in there. And it's just a deeper team than Maryland. I think it's a perfect matchup. And then without a healthy Tyrese Hunter as the 5 seed, maybe UConn knocks them off, like you said, but I just don't think they have the same kind of talent. It's been a slog for them in the Big East. I just think Florida's talent overall is kind of going to be too much for all these teams. And I'll say as an upset, just hoping the Texas Tech guys are healthy. Maybe let's just go Texas Tech over St. John's, or Texas Tech in the Elite Eight against Florida. But I just think the talent of Florida is too much. So I'm taking them to the Final Four for myself. Is that your pick?
Yeah, that's what I would go with too. There's a lot of other teams I do like in this bracket, but it's just too hard to go against everything they've got going for them right now.
There we go. Florida Gators out of the West region. Again, rotowire.com/cbasketball to get all of our content. We got written previews, betting previews, and bracket previews. We got everything. It's unending injury news as well. Thank you for listening, and we'll see everyone for the Midwest preview.